Hello, welcome to the Maths Matrix and part 2 in the percentage series. My name's Rebecca and in this video we're going to be doing increasing by a given percentage and decreasing by a given percentage. You'll need paper, a pen and a calculator, and you'll also need to know how to find a percentage of a quantity. So if you don't know how to do that already, then go back and watch part 1, which will explain how to do that. I'm going to pop some questions on screen in a second, and if you know that you know how to do those questions, then you don't have to watch this video, you can just move on to the next one. If you're not sure how to do the questions, then stick with the video and I'll show you how. Here are the questions now. If you're still here, then I'm assuming there were some questions there that you didn't know how to do, so let's get started. If you took part in part 1 of this series, then just continue on with your notes. If you didn't need to do part 1, then put a title of percentage. And then either way, put a subtitle of type 2, increasing by a given percentage. And then put method 1, non-calc. And then put use 10% chunking to find the given percentage and then add this on. And then put, e.g., increase £240 by 15%. Now, all we have to do here is find 15% of £240, which will be exactly like what we did in type 1. That's just finding a percent of a quantity. And then in this case, we need to add it on to £240 because we're being asked not what is 15% off £240, but to increase £240 by that 15%. So on a non-calculator paper, we'd put 10% equals 24. So 5% equals 12. Which means we can add those together to give 15% equals 36. And now we need to increase that 240 by that £36. So we'd just put £240 plus £36 equals £276. And that would be the final answer. If you then continue with your notes, once you've copied this down as your worked example, and put method 2, calculator. And I'm going to show you this same question again, but this time done using calculator methods. So if you put, e.g., increase £240 by 15%. So actually put that again in your notes because we're going to use that same question again. Now, if I was to increase £240 by 15% using a calculator, I need 100% of £240 because when I increase £240 by 15%, I'm going to have all of what I started with, i.e. 100%, plus another 15%. So we'd have 100% plus 15%. So we're really being asked to find 115% of £240. Then we can change the percent to a decimal and of to times. So we'll put 1.15 times 240. I'll just actually put that there like that. Then you know where it's come from. And that then would just go into the calculator. So we would literally put 1.15 times 240 into the calculator, and because I've just done the exact same calculation without a calculator, I know that the answer I got back out would be 276. All right. When you've copied that down, if you want some words to go with that, some notes to go with it, just put add the given percent to 100% and convert the total percent to a decimal. Multiply the decimal by the thing which needs to be increased. All right, so let's do another one. So put e.g. increase £730 by 12%. And then just put non-calc. So we'll do it first of all without a calculator, and then we'll do the same question with a calculator, so you get to see both methods. So we would need to first of all find 12% if we were doing it without a calculator. So 10% would be 73. So 1% would be 7.3, or in this case, because it's currency, £7.30. Another 1% would be another £7.30. So that 12% would be all those things added together. So that 12% would be 87.60, so £87.60. And we weren't asked to find 12%, we were asked to add 12% on. So now what I would have to do is add £87.60 on to 730. Which would give me £817.60. So it's just like type 1, but with an add at the end if you're doing it without a calculator. I'll just give you a second to copy that down. And if you then put calc, and we'll do the same question again with a calculator. So if we're being asked to increase that by 12%, then we need all 100% of it plus an extra 12% of it, which altogether makes 112%. Changing that into a decimal will give me 1.12. and then I would do 1.12 times 730. And because I've just done it there, I know that the answer would be 817.60. But obviously, if I hadn't done it without a calculator, that's what would go into the calculator to produce that answer. Okay. If you want to use a fraction instead of a decimal, by the way, if that's what you commonly do at your school, then you can do. You would use 112 100ths in this case, in place of 1.12. So fractions are fine as well. As I said in part 1, I find them a little bit clunkier on my calculator. I don't think they're quite as quick, but if you do use fractions, then it's fine. That's where it would go in place of 1.12. Now, it's not the method that makes these tricky, really. It's the story that often goes around them in an exam context, because the story can sometimes make it difficult to spot if you actually have got one of these. So we'll just do one in a story context, and then we'll do decreasing by a given percentage. Oh, and I'll also talk to you a little bit about VAT as well. So if you put, e.g., in 2017, a business had a turnover of £72,000. In 2018, it expects to increase its turnover by 3.5%. What will its turnover be in 2018? Now we're just going to do this one with a calculator, because it probably would be on a calculator paper, a fiddly percentage like that. If it wasn't, then you'd use the 10% chunking method, find 1% and then find 0.5% and do it like we did type 1. But for ease, we'll just do it using a calculator. This question is just saying, in a roundabout way, increase that number by 3.5%. That's all it's saying. It's just put it in a story context. So 100% plus 3.5% will be 103.5%. Changing that to a decimal will be 1.035. If you wanted to use a fraction, then you'd go with 103.5 over 100. And now what we do is 1.035 times by 72,000, because we want to have all of the 72,000, so one lot of 72,000 plus the extra 3.5%, which is that part there. And then you would just put that into the calculator. I'll just grab mine. 1.035 times 72,000 is £74,520. And that would be your final answer. So that's what they expect their turnover to be in 2018. Okay. What I want to do now is just talk to you a little bit about VAT, because increase by a given percentage questions are often given in the context of VAT. And at school, I find that people often don't bother to tell you what VAT is and how it works, which can make it difficult for you to understand what those questions are asking and to recognise that you do have an increase by a given percentage question when you encounter them on exams. In the United Kingdom, the rate of VAT is currently 20%, and it's just a kind of tax that people pay to the government. It stands for value added tax. What it means is that when you buy something in a shop, commonly, not only are you paying for the thing you want, but you're also paying 20% extra, which the shopkeeper then gives to the government. The price you see in most UK shops will be including VAT, so it will already have the cost of the goods and that extra tax added on, so that you don't get any nasty shocks when you get to the till. But if you give the shopkeeper £12, he won't be allowed to keep all of that £12. Some of that will be the 20% government portion that's been added on, and he'll have to give that away to the taxman. There are places where you see prices excluding VAT, and they're commonly in businesses who deal with other businesses. So if you go to somewhere like a builder's merchants, or if you go to an office supplies place where they tend to supply big businesses rather than private individuals, often the prices displayed will be excluding VAT, and that means that the price displayed is only for the thing that you're buying. So it's only for the bag of cement, or it's only for the computer. But when you get to the till, that won't be the price you pay, because the shopkeeper will have to add on an extra 20% that has to be given to the taxman. The reason why businesses that mainly deal with other businesses give their prices excluding VAT is because if you are a business, you're allowed to claim that VAT back from the government, which is very clumsy and inefficient. I know it sounds really weird when you first hear about it, but you will buy something and you will pay the shopkeeper extra, and he will give it to the taxman, and then the taxman will give it back to you if you run a business and you're VAT registered. So it's all very strange. But if you don't run a business and you're just buying something to use for yourself, so if you're buying a computer or some cement not to use in a business but to use yourself, then you don't get to claim that VAT back and the government keep it. But that's what VAT is. It's like a little bit extra that you get charged that gets given to the government. And at the moment in the UK, that amount is 20% of whatever the cost of the goods are. It wasn't always 20%. Within my lifetime, it's been 17.5%. And different countries around Europe have different VAT rates. And in some countries, they don't have VAT at all. If any Americans are watching, I believe you have a similar thing called sales tax. But that is what VAT is. So sometimes on an exam question, there might be a question that will say something like, in a restaurant, the bill for the food and drinks comes to £300 excluding VAT. What will the price of the meal be, including VAT? All that means is increase £300 by 20%. It just means this meal has not yet had VAT added. So you find out 20%, add it on to the cost of the meal, and that will be the overall cost that you'll have to part with on the night. Okay? But I think it really helps people to understand what VAT is, and I think often nobody bothers to tell you, and then you see it on an exam, and even though it might tell you what the VAT rate is, it will tell you that it's 20%. People, if they don't understand what VAT is and how it works, they still don't know that what they're being told to do is increase this thing by 20%. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that to you. Then if you do see it on an exam, you'll know what to do. Okay? I'm not going to give you any increase by a given percentage question to try at the moment, because there's some on the sheet that will be coming up at the end. So now let's move on to decreasing by a given percentage. So if you continue on with your notes and just put type 3, decreasing by a given percentage. And then put method 1, non-calc, and then I'm sure some of you have guessed what will happen next, but put use 10% to find the given percent, and then subtract it. E.g., decrease £860 by 15%. Okay. So in order to decrease that by 15%, we have to know what 15% is. So on a non-calculator paper, we'd say 10% equals 86. So 5% equals 43. So 15% equals 129. And then they weren't saying what is 15%, they were saying decrease that by 15%. So we would then do 860, take away 129. Which would be 731. And the question was in currency. So £731. Okay. So if you can do type 1, finding a percentage of a quantity, then increasing by a given percentage is just an add at the end, and decreasing by a given percentage is just a takeaway at the end. All right, so not that big of a leap to be able to do those types. We'll now do the same question again with a calculator. So if you put method 2, calculator, now this time we need 100% of 860, but instead of adding 15% on, we're being asked to decrease, so to take 15% off. So 100% take 15% will leave us with 85%, and that will be the decimal that we use in the multiply. Or if you're working with a fraction, 85/100ths. And then we'll do 0.85 times by 860. That will go into the calculator, and it will give us the same 731 that we had before. All right. So it's very similar to increasing by a given percentage, except it's a takeaway at the end, or it's a takeaway to start with, which will give you a 0 point something instead of a 1 point something. Incidentally, if you're increasing by a given percentage, you tend to get a 1 point something, which looks like an I for increase. So if you're increasing by something, you should be getting a 1 point something. If you're decreasing by a given percentage, you get a 0 point something because there's only some of it left. So 1 looks like I for increase by, O looks like only some of it left. All right? We'll do a question in a problem context, and then I'll give you some of your own to try. So if you put e.g., in a school, "560 people study French. "23% fewer people study German than French." How many people study German? All right, so this is just decrease by a given percentage because it's saying this many people study French, 23% less than that study German. So it's just saying what percent actually study German, which is 23% less than that. So we'd have 100% take 23%, which would leave us with 77% who study German. as a decimal, that's 0.77, 77 over 100 if you want to use the fraction. So we'd have 0.77 times 560. And if I put that in the calculator, I get 431.2. This time it's people, not currency. And so because there's not enough for 432 people, that means there must just be 431 people study German. Okay, so if you're on a non-calculator paper, it's very much the same as just finding a percentage of a quantity, except you follow it with an add if you're increasing or a takeaway if you're decreasing. If you're on a calculator paper, then you can say, well, I've got 100% of the starter amount plus another few percent if it's a percentage increase, which will give you a new percent that you can convert to a decimal. Or if it's a percentage decrease, then you're going to have 100% minus some percent, which will again give you a new percentage that you can convert to a decimal and just put straight into the calculator. All right? And those are the quickest ways of doing it with a calculator. Again, like I said in part 1, there are quite a few ways to do percentage questions on a calculator, but that one's the quickest really, and it's the one that lends itself best to doing compound growth and decay, which we'll be doing in the next video. All right? I'm going to pop the questions from the beginning back on screen now, and hopefully you will be able to do them. I've asked you to do each of them both without a calculator to practice that method and with a calculator, and then I'll put the solutions on afterwards so that you'll be able to mark them. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found the video useful. If you did, please consider subscribing or leaving me a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video where we'll be doing compound growth and decay. Thank you.